Good morning. Welcome to Places in the AM. Today we are interviewing this wonderful color designer. Enjoy. Thank you for interviewing with Places in the AM. Could you please introduce yourself and what you do?
Hello, my name is Shayna Dixon, and I am a color designer in animation.
Did you go to school for animation, specifically color design?
So, yes, I went to school for animation. I got a BFA in film and animation from Rochester School of Technology, which is in Rochester, New York. We learned all animation, 2D, 3D, and stop motion, but I decided to focus in color design.
What inspired you to pursue this as a career?
So, the show that most inspired me to get into animation is called Happily Ever After, a fairy tale for every child. It used to come on HBO when I was a kid, and it honestly it made me feel like fairy tales could be real. And I loved it because it retold fairy tales with different types of culture. So Snow White, they used Native American and Native American tribes to tell the story. And for Beauty and the Beast, they used African. So it honestly, I got to see so many different cultures and different people all in an animated show and in fairy tales, and I loved it as a kid.
Is this an art industry to get into?
Yes, it is extremely hard to get into animation, mostly because of how it's ran. It's a very word of mouth type of industry, so you really have to make a lot of connections and a lot of friends. How I got my current job at Minnie Mouse was actually one of my friends, Brianna, who is head of Black and Animated. She recommended me to the art director. So they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we heard you're looking for a job," and I accepted. But that's how most things go. Even my very first job in animation was because I won a film competition in California. I went to Cartoon Network Studios and they had this big film competition, and I won third place. And an art director, or a director, Chaz Bottoms, saw my film, loved it, and reached out to me on Instagram. So it's very word of mouth. It is very hard to get in the industry, but there are still normal job postings that a person can apply to.
Can you share some of the projects you've worked on?
Sure. So right out of college, I worked on a book. I was one of 100 illustrators for a book called She Votes, about 100 years of women's suffrage. I worked on a couple music videos, some for the World Health Organization, Cookie Kawaii, Journey. I worked on a couple short films like Batu the Musical. My first industry job was at Cartoon Network for Tig and Seek. That show is no longer around now. I worked on a couple canceled shows for DreamWorks TV and Atomic Studios. But right now, currently, I work for Mini Bowtunes at Wild Canary. It is a vendor studio that does preschool shows for Disney Junior. And I am also working on a book called Night.
What is the general compensation like for the field of color design?
So, color designers is actually one of the lower paying jobs when it comes to color. Um, we so the union sets minimums. So if you are a freelancer, it usually comes to around 17.49 a week, which comes roughly about $44 an hour, and that's if you're not union. Obviously, if you are in the union, it gets higher. I think the minimum is $51 an hour, um, which is really great. Animation is a very lucrative career path if you can get in, but color designers is one of the lower paid gigs.
Who do you mostly work with in your position?
So for a color designer, I work very closely with my art director. We're always going back and forth on what I should be coloring for the props and characters. I also get to see a lot of the background painting because we are the color department. So I see a lot of color, but I don't get to see layouts or character design or prop design. That's a totally different department.
What is your long term goal in the industry?
So my long-term, well, ultimate goal in the industry would, of course, would of course to have my own studio. I would love to tell my own stories and hire people and have them tell their own stories, really help the community as a whole. But for right now, I think a good goal of mine would to become an art director. I would love to make the decisions and call the shots when it comes to the style of a film or TV show.
Is there a color designer that inspires you?
Yes. One of the first artists I've ever followed was Nathan Fouts. He does beautiful visual development for feature film, and he works a lot. Well, he works digitally now, as we all do, but he worked a lot with acrylic and gouache. And his color and light is beautiful. You can tell an entire story just through a mood of one painting. So Nathan Fouts definitely inspired me.
How long does it usually take to complete a design?
So for a color designer, I'm pretty lucky because I work on a 3D TV show. So my color designs don't take too long, maybe a couple of hours, especially when you have back and forth from your art director. It can take a couple of hours to the entire week just for one design because we have so many variations. But if you work on a 2D show or a 2D movie, it might take a lot longer because where I don't have to think about lighting and shadow because they do that in post-production, color designers who work on a 2D show have to worry about those things and have to worry about different times of day and different lighting scenarios. So it's a lot more involved when you work on a 2D show.
Any advice for someone pursuing this field?
Sure. So my number one advice is to learn your fundamentals. A lot of people like to skip over the fundamentals, or once they have one class, they think they're done, but you have to be a forever student. Keep learning those basics and those fundamentals like perspective and lighting and shading and figure drawing because it really shows up in all aspects of animation, all aspects of art. No matter if it's painting or digital or sculpture, you really need to have a solid foundation. For being a color designer specifically, I think it is important for you to know color and light. You really have to know how to tell a story or tell a personality through color. So if you want something to look sad, of course you need to know all your blues from warm to cool. If you want something to be happy, know your colors. It's really important that you have a wide range of color theory and color knowledge and lighting as well.
All artwork shown are Shayna's original work. We'll be adding a description to her page below. Thank you so much for watching, and may your sunset be beautiful. Later.